any of you who don't know me, I'm Betty G. Welcome to, this is already our third Just an Hour series that we're holding every Friday at noon. I'm happy to welcome you for my colleagues Punya and Clarin, who are also here and who've been involved in organizing these sessions. What we usually try to do with these sessions is kick off with some general announcements to keep everyone up to date about what our faculty and students are currently doing before we jump into the topic for today, which is mentoring. Broadly, mentoring for scholarly development, broadly defined. But I just want to make a few introductory statements. First, thanks to everyone. I see a number of you here who were at the Doctoral Mixer this morning at Memorial Union. That was a face-to-face event that had the goal of giving students, faculty, and actually we had postdocs, visiting scholars there, the chance to meet each other informally to talk about their research interests and identify opportunities for collaboration or at least further connections. So thanks so much. That was a really positive experience. I know I enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about student work, students who I haven't met before. Along those lines, congratulations to Natalie Gruber, who is one of our current EDD students. She recently received a grant from Teachers College Columbia for her work on mindfulness as a mindfulness education as a support for students. In this case, the grant is enabling her to organize and hold sessions on mindfulness for students at ASU. And you probably, I hope you got an email recently that announced these mindfulness sessions. Unfortunately, I don't have a link. They'll be held in person and face-to-face. I don't know if you, Clarin, do you have any information about that you could share or post in the chat? They look like really great opportunities to be introduced to basic concepts of mindfulness and to have an opportunity to practice.
Betty, there are some flyers which I think we can include in the next newsletter. I don't think
I am getting something ready for the newsletter.
Perfect. Yep. Great. And just wanted to note that Natalie has been working with our faculty member, Dana Hendrickson, who's also been quite involved in mindfulness education programs, actually in the public schools. A shout out to Lauren Harris, one of our faculty member panelists today, who is giving a keynote at the Arizona History Council Conference on the topic of personalizing the teaching of difficult histories. The keynote is actually tomorrow. So hooray, thanks for joining us the day before, Lauren. That's really exciting. And we hope that it goes well. Another call out to Amanda Ciccini. If those of you who are using Twitter, I strongly recommend that you look up Amanda and follow her. She's been doing a lot of really exciting work in connecting and speaking about some of the concepts related to her work at different venues, most recently at the Navajo Prep High School Youth Council and the Native American Center at San Juan College. And I think I noticed an announcement of a talk at Northwestern coming up. So. Yeah. So great work, Amanda. And again, a shout out, I think this will come up later, but Punya and Clarin have sent out a survey asking for information about your use of social media. So if you haven't filled that out, I don't know, is that going out again?
We can drop the link.
Yeah.
We can drop the link in the chat again.
Please fill that out. That's really helpful for us in terms of understanding and promoting your work and helping build connections and more visibility.
So Betty, if I can just add one thing. So we have Jake Snyder, who is our videographer and our storyteller. So he has been sort of starting to tweet the work that faculty do. So I don't know, Lauren, if you saw, he designed this really nice tweet that went out, I think, yesterday or this morning. So as we learn more about what you're doing through this sort of monthly surveys that we send out, we will be, making sure that it is announced both internally, like Betty is doing now, but also to the wider external audience. So the more you let us, the easier it is for us to do that.
Great, thanks. And actually, the next shout out is for Kimberly Lopez. She's a clinical assistant professor, and she's been involved in a variety of state and national panels and conferences around the topics of teacher mobility and veteran education. In fact, there's so many we can't list them now. That's something, again, too, I think, Punya, we can share in the newsletter and in other venues. Another piece of information, and this will go in next week's newsletter too. So this is also a pitch for the newsletter. If you haven't been looking at it, please do. The conversation will be holding, the conversation is a group, an organization, will be holding a session on crafting a strong pitch next Wednesday, the 21st from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time. So again, we'll be putting that in the newsletter. And I'll just touch on one more thing. It's a plug for next week's Just an Hour, where we're going to be talking about the question of how we design a student success research agenda. And I'm excited about all our topics. I'm excited about this one, given the recent conversations I've had with Erica Mitchell and other folks on our student success team. They're doing some amazing work. You'll be surprised by some of the demographics that they'll be able to share about our student population, as well as the framework that they've developed for supporting students. And they're seeking input on designing a research agenda, among other things. And so we're really hoping to get broad input from those of you who are students as well as faculty, and even to see if we can generate some interest in participating in some way to support their work. So more about that next week. But now let's jump ahead to today's session, Mentorship for Scholarly Development. And Punya, why don't you jump in and do the introduction to our great panel who's here today.
Sure, thank you. And thank you all again for joining us for what is, I think, our third Just an Hour session. These are being recorded, and we are actually working on making sure that they're archived on the my.education website. We will let you know that once it's done. So today's topic is mentorship for scholarly development. We all recognize and understand that mentorship is critical to success in almost any field. And in some ways, the very idea of the doctoral program is based on an idea of mentorship, and that said, at various stages in our own careers, we have both served as mentors or mentees, often at the same time. So the rationale or the reason behind this conversation is to explore and discuss various approaches to mentorship, what works for whom, for what, and what doesn't, in what context. Of course, matters get complicated when we bring in, as we should, issues of social, cultural differences and diversity. There is no one size fits all, but I think that there are patterns and themes that we can learn from each other. So without going on further and further, this is always fun and exciting to bring a panel of our colleagues together. So today we have Marina Basu, Aisha Boyce, Lauren Harris, and Ivonne Lujano. But we also know that each of you have had experience in these spaces as well. So feel free to drop in your comments in the chat, as well as speak up as and when we get some opportunities to do so. So I introduce each person. I'm actually each of you to sort of introduce yourself and what your scholarly interests are before we jump into the broader conversation about mentorship. So first of all, Marina, on to you.
Thank you, Punya. Hi, everyone. I'm Marina Basu, a fourth-year doctoral student in the LLT program. I've been a teacher, educator, and a curriculum developer, mostly in India and mostly in mathematics, but in the US too. My current research focuses on the intersection of creativity and equity in mathematics teacher education, art-based approaches to inquiry, and non-Western perspectives in education and research.
So I should have figured out unmute a while back, but I still haven't. Ayesha.
Hi, my name is Aisha Boyce. I'm an associate professor in the Ed Leadership and Innovation Division. My research kind of focuses on attending to issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, justice, access, climate within program evaluation particularly within STEM and other kind of contexts with systematically marginalized populations. I also write about teaching and learning within evaluation and mentoring students of color.
So Ayesha, you had shared with us a YouTube video, which you had talked about strategies for mentoring graduate students of color. I'm going to drop that link there so that people can take a look at that later as well. With that, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Harris. I'm an associate professor of history education in the teacher preparation program. I also have an appointment in Shippers, which is a school of historical, philosophical, and religious studies. And my work focuses on the teaching and learning of history, recently really focused on the teaching of difficult histories, that are defined as traumatic in the past and can be difficult to teach and learn in the present, depending on context. I also do a lot of work with curriculum in social studies and teacher preparation.
Thank you. So to start us off, I think we'll just kick off with a short question about, to make it like specific, describe a positive mentoring experience that you have had as on a mentee, and let's go in reverse order. So Lauren, start with you and we will go the other way this time.
Hey, Punya, real quick, can I launch my poll just to get a sense of where people are at in the audience?
Oh, absolutely. Go for it. All right. So you should have a poll up on your screen. Go ahead and vote. And Lauren, you could speak while I guess people are voting.
Okay, so this question of a positive mentoring experience, I wrote to Claren and asked, are we thinking about mentoring from the perspective of being a mentee or being a mentor? And it was nice that she described that it's really about both. I really thought about this from the perspective of being a mentor. I've had some really wonderful experiences at ASU in mentoring doctoral students and students at many other levels, honors students, master's level students. And so one positive experience involved a student who was assigned to me as an RA who was not in my field. So sometimes that happens. This was an LLT student who I was their secondary supervisor, not the advisor. And she ended up we worked together for 2 years. And I think the reason it was such a positive experience was in part because she was not in my field. So she was in English language arts, so not too far afield from history and social studies. But at the time I was doing a project on researching how teachers teach about genocide in a comparative way. And it turns out that couple of the teachers in our study were language arts teachers who were teaching an elective on the Holocaust and other genocides. And because of her perspectives as a graduate student and former ELA teacher, although I felt like I was, showing her and having her learn about interview skills and classroom observations and so forth, I was also learning so much from her about frames of looking at English language arts teaching, and so we were sort of having a wonderful conversation across this study about differences and similarities between the two fields. And I think the experience she was able to be part of this project from the beginning. And in the second year that we worked together, she was able to take the lead on reanalyzing some of the data from a different perspective and lead authoring a journal article where I was the third author, and she led the project with another graduate student as the second author. And I think that she's told me that experience was a really helpful one. So I think the positive part was having her be involved in every part of the research process, but then also for me being able to learn so much from her.
Thank you, Lauren. And I apologize to Yvonne. Thank you, Gustavo, for pointing out that I'm giving you a chance to introduce yourself. I am very sorry. So Yvonne, if you could go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe share an example of a positive mentoring or mentee that you have had.
course, and thank you. No worries. Sometimes it happens. Hi, everyone. My name is Ivonne. I am a 4th year student at the EP program. My research interests are around scholarly publications. Currently, I'm working on my dissertation on the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the editorial boards of open access mega journals. I've been working in open access initiatives since 10 years now. So I'm very interested in, the knowledge mobilization, dissemination of scholarly work, and so on. And regarding the topic of this panel, I can share with you the experience that I had like in the middle of the pandemic. I think it was in 2020. A colleague from Peru, she had an initiative of mentoring for students, undergraduates in Latin America. It was called Ekpapalek. I'm gonna share, so the website now is down because the project ended because of some issues on the organization of mentoring at a big scale. But there's a blog that I posted in the chat, so you can have an idea of what was this initiative about. This was basically an organization of Latino and Latina scholars and graduate students and faculty that work currently, in universities or other organizations, and we were kind of a pool of mentors. There is a website where they could choose a mentor, and we were, matched and connected, and we brought these students like some advice about, for instance, language and how to apply for scholarships, things like that. So the idea was to kind of empower Latino and Latina students to go study abroad. And it was very interesting to listen to all these stories of the students that, were asking questions about to survive, to the transition to living in another country and things like that. And it was, for me, very interesting to see, again, these stories, the different needs that the students have. And also that helped me to reflect on my own needs and on my own experiences in studying abroad in the US. So it was really a nice experience. Unfortunately, it couldn't keep going because it requires a lot of efforts in terms of the organizational efforts and all that kind of stuff. But actually, also that was a very nice experience in terms of recording all the for instance, the goals that we set with the students and things like that in a very simple system, like a computing system, and so they could keep the record of these people. And yeah, I really appreciated the opportunity to collaborate with this organization. And I realized how when the students or the mentees express the very basic needs, they really felt this relief. And even though it was something like simple or like something that it's not hard to look for or to search in Google or whatever, the fact that someone else tells you, well, don't worry, we can solve this and I'm here for you, was something really, really meaningful for them. And for me too, as a mentor.
Thank you, Yvonne. And we are seeing sort of two different kinds of examples here already emerging. And so with that, Ayesha, can you example of a positive mentoring or mentee experience that you've had?
Sure, I can just briefly share one of each super fast. So in terms of being a mentee, I'll just mention, I think it's good to be a mentee at all stages of your career. I've had great mentorship as a graduate student, as a tenure track assistant professor, and I still keep in contact with my mentors. My first year of being an assistant tenure track professor, I wasn't quite sure if I was cut out to do with it. My first grant proposal was rejected. My first author proposal was a desk reject. And I was just like, whoa, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm obviously a tenured associate professor now, so I made it. But at the time I was thinking of leaving academia, and I talked to my department chair and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I belong here. I don't know if I'm good enough. And he was just always really, really great about like little micro affirmations and micro validations. He didn't like try to change my mind. He just said, one, give it time. So whether you're in, trying to obtain your PhD, if you're on the tenure track, if you're in any other sort of position, giving it time and trying to figure out, what you want your narrative to be, and having people who kind of uplift you in lots of little ways. We would go to a meeting, and after the meeting, we'd be walking down the hallway and he'd be like, wow, like that was really good. Not like these huge expressions of like, you're the best, but like these very, little micro affirmations, which were really important. And then I think the most powerful mentor experience for me at this far is, I have, mentored a lot of graduate students, many of them who have been students of color. And, with the movement for Black lives, bringing prominence to the killing of Black bodies by armed professionals. In the US, Kevin Lamont Scott was murdered in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was just, like an hour away from my old institution. And, it's like the vicarious trauma of like seeing people who look like you being killed over and over again weighs a lot on students in ways that we can't even imagine, especially there's been research that shows that like seeing people who look like you being killed over and over again uniquely impacts people from marginalized populations. And so I'm actually like a pretty strict person. Like we have deadlines, we have to get this done. And I remember two of my students came in and we were meeting to kind of discuss a project and check deadlines. And I could tell like that they were upset, like there were protests happening, around campus. And I just kind of like got up and shut my door and we all just like burst out crying. It was like such a powerful experience because for me, it showed them like I'm a human too. Like I'm, and so I think, just remembering that the people who you're mentoring and the people who you are a mentee to have lives outside. I think if anything, the pandemic has showed us that. I've like you all, I've had many meetings where I'm like trying to give a presentation. My son pops in and I'm like, sorry, like that's my life right now. So yeah, those were two really impactful experiences for me. And I kind of talk about like 5 overall experiences in my talk. And so I'm just going to put them in the chat, just things for people to be thoughtful about, whether you are receiving mentoring or whether you are the mentor, and not just for students of color, but really for anyone who comes from any different identities, because we all have identities of privilege and oppression.
Thank you, Ayesha, for both of those stories that you shared. So Betty had this little comment here saying that, that the micro affirmation is a great idea. Somebody who will remain nameless when I was a grad student would give macro super affirmations, and they always backfired because they seemed so fake. Oh, you are the great, blah, blah, blah. And I knew that it took literally 2 hours for something. I'm like, oh, this is the best I've ever seen. Like, it can't be, because I know it is not. And so sometimes it's the micros which are actually more genuine because they happen over time. So thank you for sharing that. With that, Marina, on to you.
Yeah. So I remembered what Karen had said in the email about not just including faculty when we are talking as mentees, but also maybe other graduate students or seniors who've been in that relationship as my mentor. So I'm going to touch upon both of those. And I'm also going to kind of zoom out a little and give a general experience, because for me, mentoring has been an ongoing relationship. So it's very difficult for me to pin down one specific experience. I will share a couple of them, but I'm also going to give you the big picture of what I've experienced here. So it's mostly been very positive experiences with faculty and with senior students. When I first joined the program, I remember I used to have all kinds of questions about all kinds of tiny things. And when you're coming in as an international student and you don't know the culture of the place, you don't know how academia works in this institution, you have all these million questions. And so I remember students from the 4th year in the program to the 2nd year in the program were always so helpful with these questions that I had. And of course, the way MLFTC is structured, you also have TCDC tying you up with a specific mentor. And that mentor helped me specifically look at, mathematics, education, and what are the different venues where I could, interact. She was a 2nd year student at that point of time. But coming to working with faculty mentors, There's been my primary advisor, multiple other faculty that I've worked with. And what I've taken away from it is this way they have centered my experiences and my ideas and given me that confidence to go ahead with those ideas. I think that that's been the biggest takeaway, because I came from a very different set of educational experiences. And it was my advisor who said, you can take that and, build on it, build on those experiences and theorize about it. So that's been my greatest growth as a scholar. Smaller experiences here and there. And this, if there are students out there, I would encourage you, it's not just the person that you're paired with as a, advisor. It's almost all faculty out there is ready to help you and support you. So I've had, places where I've been stuck with writing a paper or something, and I've reached out to people, say like Mishra, or somebody else saying, hey, can I talk through these ideas with you? And all faculty have been so generous with their time and with their guidance. And then there's a couple of specific things that I want to point out. One was, last year I was doing my comprehensive exams. It was also the back end of the COVID lockdowns. I had certain health issues. I reached a point, as Dr. Boyce was saying, where I felt, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm cut out for this. And my committee supported me so unconditionally with their patience, with their understanding, and just giving me that time and space to figure things out and to come back to my, zone where I could work again. And for that, I'm so grateful. And then little things like there was a course where the professor heard the ideas that I was presenting in class, and he said, we can write a paper together about this. And he guided me throughout the process, like this is how you figure out which journal to send it to. And then all the way through the writing and the publishing, and then, doing the reviewer feedback, addressing it, and making sure that I was acknowledged as the first author for the ideas that I was bringing in. Those really help you grow as a person, as a scholar, gain confidence in the work you're doing.
Thank you, Marina. And I think all of us in the faculty are very grateful for what you said. And I'm proud to be part of a college which is clearly, in your experience at least, has been very supportive. So I'm looking at the poll that Clarin had shared. Looks like 2 out of the 16 people who filled it themselves as mentors, 4 as mentees, and the largest group, 10 out of the 16, regard themselves both as mentor and mentee, which is sort of, I think, thematically sort of connects with how we are thinking about it. Even at this point in my career, I know I look to people who will be my mentors because the job is changing, I am changing, the contexts are changing. And so I think that play these different roles at different times. With that, I'm going to pass the baton to Betty for the next round of questions. With a thought to everybody who is watching, who's on the Zoom call, if you have any questions or any thoughts that you want to share, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will have specific times that we can actually speak up. And because all of us here have experience in both of these dimensions. With that, on to you.
Thanks, Punya. Yes, and I was also going to invite people to post comments or questions or their own experiences in the chat. And not to distract you, but one of the topics that I don't know that we'll get to has to do with people's reactions to formal mentoring relationships. And you might want to post something about that in the chat while we're talking, just to get some ideas out about that. So a couple of things I really appreciate. I mean, in the discussion so far about mentoring, the significance of the emotional impact of mentoring in terms of affirmations and support, and the idea that you can do it, that goes far beyond, simply telling you how to navigate, not simply, but, teaching you how to navigate a system or giving advice on career options or things like that. I think that's really important. And the other thing too are the multiple forms that mentoring takes. One thing, Ayesha, another thing I was intrigued by in your post was the idea of mentoring squads. I mean, to be honest, that I saw that and I thought, oh, I would love a mentoring squad. That sounds really powerful. I've got a squad of people helping me. So maybe we can get around to talking a little bit more about that and other things later in this time. But now I'd like to shift the focus a little bit and ask some of the panelists about experiences with mentoring that were not successful. And I think Punya shared one example, of affirmations that were so over the top that they seemed meaningless. So that's perhaps a smaller instance. But can any of you think about experiences that you'd like to share that were not successful and what you learned from them? So let's see, Ivonne, would you like to start? Do you have any experiences like that to share?
Yeah, thank you. I had experience being a mentor when I was teaching in Mexico. I was a mentor of a group of students, and they were mostly female students. And you may know that in Mexico, we have a very big problem on violence against women. And these students had a lot of issues on that. And they started, we started to have sessions and everything. And I had the support of the psychology department at the school where I was working. And, I had to go and tell them, well, I'm not prepared and I don't have the skills, to help these students because they were struggling with very, big issues about sexual abuse and these kind of things. And so I think it was not successful, completely successful for me and for them also because I didn't have the skills. That was at the beginning. Then I received more training, but I noticed how I wanted to help them, but I didn't, how to address very, special issues on special things that I didn't know. And also I noticed how they started to kind of create a dependent relation with me, like they were kind of just waiting for my advice or things like that because they didn't have, other support in their families and so on. So I think then it started to, get better because the psychology department supported me as well. But at the beginning, it was confusing for me. It was frustrating as well. And I think it is coming back to what has been said about skills and having these experience and skills on how to talk about these aggressions and everything. It is really important, and it's also linked to something that I always think about, which is boundaries, right? How to put your own boundaries and the mentee as well. It was sad at some point, but then again, the psychology department also realized that you cannot have mentors without a training.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. And I'm nodding here because I can think of a few instances myself where students were undergoing, really traumatic experiences. Actually, Ayesha, you talked about, closing the door with your students and crying together. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with dealing with that kind of powerful emotion. So how do we address this as mentors? And I think, Ivonne, you're talking too, what are the boundaries to mentoring? What should we or shouldn't we expect of ourselves as mentors in those kind of situations? So again, encourage anyone in the chat to take up these threads. Lauren, do you have an experience to share that was not as optimal as you'd hope and something you learned?
So I would say this is not a really negative experience, but just more negative than positive experience that I've thought about when asked this question. So, and I think it speaks to the question you just mentioned, Betty, that we may not have time to formally get to, which is the formally structured kind of mentoring systems. So when I first came to ASU, there was that in place for new faculty, or at least the year I came, and this is a while ago. And I think that for me, anytime you come to a new place as a graduate student, as a faculty member, there is just so much you have to learn, and especially at a really large place like ASU. And so I was assigned a mentor, but I think I wouldn't say it was a hugely successful mentee mentoring situation. And I think not because of the person at all, but I think because there was no guidance as to sort of what types of things that relationship was supposed to be about. And I think they abandoned it after that year, maybe. So I don't know if other people had similar situations, but to me, it felt that I wasn't getting enough mentoring, maybe is what I felt. And so I started to reach out, and there's someone on this call who I reached out to in that first year, Leanna Archambault, who happened to be teaching at West Campus, where I was teaching one day a week, and we would go out for coffee maybe every week almost. And that, that was more informal, that she was not assigned to me, but that became a much more productive and wonderful mentoring experience than the sort of assigned person. And so I don't know if I'm against assigning mentors or that sort of thing, but I think that the purpose really has to be explained and bought into by the people involved.
Thanks, Lauren. Great point. It reminds me sort of, the origins of this whole valuing of mentoring, I think really came from studies of I think they were actually successful men in different professions who had mentoring relationships that developed somewhat organically. And I think based on that, a lot of institutions and places tried to develop formal mentoring programs, but I think a lot of them are lacking for a variety of reasons. And I know we've been talking about mentoring at the college level now as well, and a lot of people have expressed reservations. So that was one of the reasons why I think we brought that question up. But thanks, that was a really helpful example. So let's see, Ayesha, would you like to share?
Sure. I think the thing that's interesting for people who are becoming mentors is that there's not a lot of emphasis on, or I should say, intrinsic rewards in place beyond like, I feel like this is right, I feel like this is who I am, I feel like this is important, are in place, especially for those who are graduate students who are on who are in faculty positions to be a good mentor, right? I don't think that there's a ton of trainings available. So I think Ivonne kind of mentioned this, and I certainly think, in her case, and what I've also experienced is the difference between being someone's mentor and then like someone needing to be referred to a mental health professional, and knowing where that line is. I would say like, the negative experience for me was, when I started my career as a tenure track assistant professor, I really wanted to develop competence in being a mentor and develop competence, especially in mentoring multiple students around multiple projects. And as I started to, receive more federal funding, like I had lots of projects in different places, and I wanted mentoring, like, how should I organize myself? Should I develop a lab? What should I do? And, I went and talked to my chair, he didn't know. And I went and talked to like the psychology department chair, they didn't know. And I went and talked to the biology department chair and they didn't know. And I'm like, well, how do you do it with your faculty? And they said, oh, well, they just figure it out. And I thought, well, that is very scary. And in the end, I, was able to kind of sought out a few trainings, but it was kind of trial by fire. And I think during those first few years, it was probably a little bit rough for my students because we'd have a meeting here, have a meeting there. And now I co-direct a lab similar to like, social science labs or physical science labs. But I think there's, not enough opportunities like these for faculty and graduate students to come together to talk about how to be a mentor. Also, how to be a good mentee. I think there's certainly things that you can do to take agency of your experience to be an advocate for yourself. And I think there's, sometimes there's not enough attention to how to do that in a respectful but sort of meaningful sort of way so that you can get the most out of your experience. Because the reality is that you may not always have the best mentor. And so knowing kind of what to do. And I just mentioned, I didn't click enter, I was put in the chat there, is that I think it's just really good for everyone to have multiple mentors, right? And this is part of the squad conversation, but one person can't fulfill everything, I have mentors who are my mentors only because they're Black women in academia. That's it. I reached out to them. You're Black, I'm Black, you're a woman, I want to talk to you. I have mentors who have young children, or who have had at one point had young children. Mentors within my field, mentors within the university, right? Because ultimately we need people to have like different perspectives on the different phases of our personal and professional lives, I think, in order for us to be successful. So.
Great. I just share my most important mentor when I was a graduate student was a peer mentor. He was a year ahead of me in the program, and I don't think I could have done it without him. So I appreciate that comment. And also too, I mean, this is something I think we need to explore more, the idea that there's ways to be a good mentee in terms of reaching out and identifying different people, which also makes me think though of equity issues in mentoring, because I've had some students who were great at that. They had no qualms about reaching out and, develop wonderful networks, and others that were really hesitant to do that, and so how do we support students in being mentees, I think, is actually a great topic for us. We need something about that in our program, maybe. So Marina, your experiences, if you have negative ones that you've learned something from.
Okay, I was just typing in something into the chat about the structuring. So maybe I'll finish my thought here on that. So I think the structuring, it worked partly for me, both in TCDC mentoring structure and the department. Maybe it can become like a starting point for people who don't know how to reach out, and then have these options that, you can go beyond that relationship and explore, connect with other people. So yeah, just to end that note, your specific question was about, sorry, could you ask me the question that you asked?
Sure. Have there been experiences you've had that have not been that positive in mentoring, either as a mentee or mentor? And if you have had such experiences, what have you learned from them?
Okay. So yeah, so it's not so much as not successful, because yes, obviously I've learned something, I've picked up skills, and I've also learned about different working styles. But maybe some relationships haven't continued into the long term for me. And so what I've learned is that it helps if, especially in the context of a very close mentor-mentee relationship, it helps to have at least some amount of philosophical and methodological alignment, some resonances in the way we work. For example, I worked with one person who had, who would just give me a single step, and I never got the bigger picture. And I found it very difficult to just follow that one instruction and do the work and then wait for the next set of instructions. Whereas somebody else's working style is, okay, here's the big picture. This is what I want you to do. Now you do it how you want to do it. So again, it comes down to each person's working style, I think, to some extent. And so that's where I felt, just to be aware of it, that, okay, this is not working because of this, and then to step out of it or talk about it.
Great, thanks. It actually makes me think of an experience I had not that long ago, where the person who was mentoring me actually gave me a bunch of options and said, well, what approach would work best? Do you want to shadow me, or do you want me to explain this? Or it was really kind of interesting. I actually couldn't recall before someone having tried to figure out what my preference was as a mentee. So thanks you for that comment. I want to encourage everyone else, if you would like to jump in with questions. I'm actually going to call out Leanna. If you wouldn't mind, Leanna, expanding a bit on the comment you put in chat to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's just kind of trying to navigate at each stage, not just career, but also just this notion of kind of what's next in this step. And so I don't think it's unusual to get to the associate level and try to have to reassess with, okay, what are my mentoring needs now? Like, what's next? How do I, trying to figure out kind of, and I think especially as you get to be a senior faculty, same idea. And also this notion of phase of life, I'm just finding that we don't discuss these things. And so, you know, like getting to this middle age kind of as a senior, I think it's a unique need that there should be more conversation about, and that I'm, you know, kind of experiencing, and it's not something that we necessarily discuss, or that there's a lot of mentoring, but like, how do I navigate kind of this next phase and trying to figure out what's next? And so I do agree with this panel. Like, I think not just for graduate students, but for all phases of career, you know, assistant, associate, full, but also considering, you know, when you have small kids, when you have kids that are going off to college, when you're, you know, when you have empty nest, kind of that notion of phase of life. And I'll just also thank Lauren, because she's been just as much of a mentor to me, if, you know, so I think it's been very, our partnership has been very fruitful over the years. So that's been very helpful, but I think that there's an opportunity for senior faculty to play a role, not just kind of that notion of like working with younger faculty, but then also how do we get our mentoring needs met? And I like the poll, because I do think we are both mentors and mentees at all stages.
So if I can jump in here, Liana, I remember once when I got tenure, I had this sense of vacuum. It's like you'd been running for 6 years to get a PhD, and then running again for the next 10 years, and then it was like, now what, right? And it was a genuinely sort of a scary thing. And what do I again? That's also the point. Like I said, there are significant life at that point. Kids are getting to be a certain age. You are getting to be a certain age, and I remember that took a while to sort of get sort of confusion. It was basically that, right? It was then you sort of had this goal that you were running towards, and you know that I want to get tenure, and now what? And that was a interesting. So I remember talking to some faculty in our higher ed program at Michigan State. Baldwin, he actually ended up going and doing a piece of research, which published on mid-career faculty and what their needs are. And one of the things that emerges is that's also a point where people are looking at different. Some people want to focus on teaching, people want to go into admin, some people want to do their research. So there's all of that happening as well. That's the first time you really add these sort of fork where you can make some different choices, which will have very significant consequences. And very often we don't know much about what those choices are and what they even mean, what the means are. So thank you for that comment. So I think I would love to hear from, you know, Betty, I don't know what you think, but from our people in the broad audience here, because all of them, like, you know, we all agree that we have been mentors and mentees. Some things that seem for you or not, what would you like to see part of also for us to think about college, how we can approach this work? Would love to hear. So just speak up, unmute, and go.
And hey, to kick it off, I'm looking for a retirement mentor. So anyone who wants to chip in thinking of life phases, where's my retirement mentor?
Oh, I'm looking for the empty nest mentor. It's driving me nuts. I was telling my wife, is like, I have never missed my kids as much as, like, it's weird. You know, I used to be like, they're gone, it's great. And suddenly this season, maybe it's post-pandemic or whatever, because we hung out for a year together, I am missing them desperately. It's very strange.
So come on, folks, thoughts?
Yeah.
Is there any difference between mentors and support groups? Because, you know, when Punya made the mention about emptiness, I immediately connected with Iveta is having the same situation.
Yes.
We
have commiserated.
Probably somebody else, and it's like, okay, there you have a natural, you know, support group, and there is so. Is there any? Because you were mentioning the need of having multiple mentors, so maybe the idea of peer-to-peer support groups should be something close to that. I don't know, it just occurred to me. So you guys know more.
I think that's a very, can you all hear me, by the way? Am I good? Wonderful. I think that's a very good recommendation. Even as we talk to our natural kind of groups are often our doctoral cohorts that are usually smaller and connecting. That I think that's a good approach to think about how do we create these support networks. In line with that, I will recommend also looking at external mentoring programs or opportunities that we have sometimes within our professional academic organizations. For example, for those of us in educational leadership and policy, more leadership, UCEA, University Council for Educational Administration, which we are an institutional member of, has a national mentoring network that pairs you with a national scholar, right? Nationally recognized scholar that's part of it, leadership. And that program goal, this is the Barbara L. Jackson Scholars Network, which I was overseeing about 10 years ago. I used to be the Associate Director for Graduate Student Development for UCEA. And the goal there with this particular program was to diversify the professoriate. But it's also coupled with this mentoring program. And it's a way to essentially nominate graduate students, doctoral students of color into such programs, and then tied to this national mentoring program at least for 2 years. And we usually try to recruit doctoral students in the last 2 years. Now, I reference that program because there are also other mentoring programs and projects, either under AERA, under a certain division, where they might not be these long 2-year commitments, but they have either mentoring programs that you come in for a day. And what that does, it helps you then connect with larger mentoring network opportunities from what's going to happen when you're done with your degree, tying that opportunity that might connect you with folks outside of the institution. So look for those. Speak to your faculty about some of these either ARA programs or division programs, or even SIG programs as well. There are other organizations that have mentoring programs. The American Association for Hispanics in Higher Ed has a grad fellows program. The ASH, the Association for the Study of Higher Ed, also has other mentoring programs. So I think those are great programs to definitely keep an eye out and to look at and to apply for. I know that, again, a lot of these academic professional programs, I'm looking at Ayesha, there might be something even within the evaluation professional academic that also does, because there's always an interest to provide these mentoring programs from a national perspective.
So Cristobal, I mean, that's wonderful, that list that you just told us. I mean, I think that maybe that's, we could create a page on the my.education site, which has these links to these different kinds of fellowships and mentoring programs. That would be a great resource to add to that. So any other thoughts?
Just wondering if anyone has any thoughts about this question of what we might do in the college to better support and facilitate mentoring. It seems like there's really mixed reactions to formal mentoring programs, at least of the kind that have been traditionally done. But anyone want to make any other suggestions for things that we could facilitate?
What we did this morning with the doctoral student faculty mixer, that kind of informal gathering engagement leads to opportunities just to simply get to know faculty, and faculty get to know students, right? We had one of our colleagues Zoom into our class, to Sherman and I's class, the policy class on Monday, and I asked the question, knowing what you know now, what would you advise your doctoral student self? One of the things that, and I believe in this, and I do this too, is try to get as many opportunities just to get to know faculty, and the faculty get to know you, right? And it is about trying to just create that time. And so perhaps for us, as a starting point, we might want to think about more such opportunities, whether we call them mixers or it doesn't have to be as formal, more of that social engagement opportunities for people to get to know each other and start these mentoring opportunities. That might be something that we can think about, try to also support them, and not just from a physical aspect, but also in a kind of Zoom or virtual kind of opportunity just to get to know people. I think that's always the simpler, the better, just get to know and connect. So I think that's something we could think about how we might foster that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Cristobal. Yvonne, you have your hand up. You'd like to add something? And then Ayesha, I think.
Yeah, just very quick. I think maybe this is a good moment to also promote our journal, The Current Issues in Education. I'm pretty sure you are aware that we have a completely produced student-led journal in Teachers College, and we have promoted these like mentors or like these trainings about how to be a reviewer. And that has helped our students to become reviewers, like not just for the journal, but you know, it's really helpful to, you know, also improve your own writing skills and so on. And we are actually planning to hold an event in October about these skills on how to review. And I think also, you know, just like to see how, you know, the student initiatives are also kind of having these mentorship, peer-to-peer mentorship programs. Yeah.
Makes me just think actually with the resource list, maybe we can invite people who feel like comfortable mentoring on some focused area to volunteer. We can put names up. So it makes it a little bit easier for other people, students, et cetera, to reach out because they know that they're going to be well received. So I know we're getting near the end of time. Ayesha, you had your hand up. Would you like to add?
Super quick thought. I have my evaluator hat on. Instead of us, you know, being like, oh, let's do this, we might like do like a very high level needs assessment, like sending out a survey, like what type of mentoring would you like, or what topics would you be interested in? I know people hate surveys, so, you know, could be like super quick, but that way, you know, then maybe you'll have fodder for these topics for even for next semester and beyond, or maybe there's some more in-depth, you know, like longer than the hour workshops that people might be interested in. And that way, you know, people will be interested and committed to coming because, you know, if 30 people said we need X, then, you know, probably at least half of those should show up for that topic.
Great suggestion, Ayesha. And we won't reach out to you. I know you're super busy to actually do the needs assessment. So, but thanks so much. That's a great idea. Punya, would you like to wrap things up since we just have a minute or two? I can turn it back to you.
And again, thank you to the panel for joining us today. Always amazing to hear from all of you, and all of you who also joined in and participated and listened. This is, like I said, you know, Betty and I and Clarin, when we were planning this, we just wanted an opportunity to talk about ideas, to talk about things. That's why we are in academia. And so we're always getting a consistent number of people here. Tell your friends to join. Very informal, very casual. And it's just fun to see all of you, even if it's on Zoom. It's great. For next week, as Betty mentioned, I won't go into great detail, but we're looking at how can we develop a scholarly research agenda around student success. Our students team has something very innovative around sort of student care and support. And they are really interested in developing a research agenda and came to Betty and me to talk about it and we thought that would be a great episode session for us to sort of learn from them, but also share some of what we could contribute in that conversation. I want to put in a pitch for that social media survey, as to get this scholarly roundup, which used to just be about publications. We have made a couple of significant changes to expanded the range of things that we are looking for. That's how we find out about keynotes and other things that you're doing. And it's easier to complete. So it'll take a few minutes. Will come out once every month. Please fill that out. As always, check in on the newsletter and have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. Thank you very much.